Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 1.
It happened in 2019, just outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The store was a 24-hour budget grocery chain, one of those places where the fluorescent lights always seemed to hum a little too loud, and everything felt vaguely off. Not dangerous, just tired, worn down. A place people went when they had no other options. The locals called it the Blue Aisle, even though that wasn't its real name. Kyle had worked night shift there for about 6 months. He dropped out of community college, moved back in with his mother, and needed a job that didn't ask too many questions. The graveyard shift at a nearly forgotten grocery store sounded perfect. He stocked shelves, swept floors, occasionally rang up a straggler or two, mostly truckers or tweakers who wandered in at 2 a.m. to buy off-brand soda and single-serve snack cakes. It was always quiet after midnight. Still, but not peaceful. Kyle would often catch himself glancing down aisle 7, the cereal aisle, because something about it felt wrong. It wasn't anything he could explain. The lights flickered there more than anywhere else. The air was colder, and items always seemed to fall off the shelves in that one aisle, like someone was brushing past them or reaching out. One night, around 3:20 a.m., Kyle was walking back from the stockroom when he saw movement. A tall man, impossibly thin, stood at the end of aisle 7. He was facing the shelves with his back to Kyle, unmoving. His skin was gray, not just pale, but gray, like wet cement. His clothes looked soaked, clinging to his frame as if he had just stepped out of a lake. Kyle didn't say anything at first, just stared. There wasn't supposed to be anyone else in the store. "Sir?" Kyle finally called out, stepping forward. "The store's closed for restocking." The man didn't turn around. He didn't move at all. But Kyle swore he heard something, breathing, ragged and wet. Not from the man, but above him. He looked up, and the overhead light directly above the figure was blackened, like smoke-stained glass. It buzzed once, then popped. The sound made Kyle flinch. When he looked back down, the man was gone. Kyle tried to convince himself he was just tired, hallucinating. He didn't tell anyone. But after that night, he started hearing things. Whispers in the walk-in cooler, soft footsteps behind him in empty aisles. The security monitors would glitch, showing what looked like someone crawling on the ceiling for a split second before returning to static. It got worse when he started dreaming about aisle 7. Every night, same dream. He's walking down the aisle and all the cereal boxes are facing the wrong way. Backward. The nutrition labels lined up like rows of staring white eyes. And just as he reaches the end, that thing, not a man, not anymore, steps out from behind the last shelf. Eventually, Kyle quit. No notice, no explanation. He left in the middle of his shift after seeing the gray man again, this time closer, 3 feet away, dripping on the tile floor. He wasn't the first to run, and he wasn't the last. Last year, a new employee named Rachel started working the same shift. She didn't know anything about Kyle or the stories, but one night she posted a blurry security cam clip on Reddit. Aisle 7, 3:17 a.m. You can just barely make out the shape of a tall, thin man standing perfectly still at the end of the aisle. And for a few frames, just behind him on the ceiling, you can see something hanging upside down, long-limbed, skinless, mouth wide open. The post was deleted within hours. But some say if you go to the Blue Aisle after 3 a.m. and you stand perfectly still at the end of aisle 7, you'll hear it breathing. And if you stay long enough, you'll see the shelves start to bleed.
Story number 2.
It happened in a small Midwestern town in 2017. The grocery store was one of those outdated chains that hadn't changed in decades. Dim lighting, stained linoleum floors, and the ever-present hum of old refrigeration units. Locals called it Hillson's Market, though the faded sign outside had lost half its letters. Everyone in town shopped there because it was the only option for 30 miles. Staff turnover was high, and customers often joked about how the place felt cursed. But no one said it seriously, at least not until Caitlin disappeared. Caitlin was a college sophomore home for summer break. She picked up the night shift stocking shelves, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., alongside an older guy named Ron, who'd worked there for over 20 years. Caitlin was the type to post everything on Instagram. Late-night aisle selfies, videos of herself goofing off in the empty store. But her post stopped suddenly on July 18th. That night started off normal. Security footage showed her entering at 9:53 p.m. with an iced coffee and earbuds in. She clocked in, waved at Ron, and went to aisle 7 to start restocking canned goods. Everything after that gets strange. At around 1:12 a.m., Ron told police he realized the store had gone completely silent. No music, no hum of the fridges, just dead silence, like someone had flipped off the world. He called out for Caitlin, but she didn't answer. Thinking she might be in the back, he walked the aisles. That's when he found the trail. Cans of vegetables, Del Monte green beans, corn, and peas, lined up perfectly down the center of aisle 7, leading toward the meat department in the back. Each label faced forward, each can precisely spaced as if someone had used a ruler. At the end of the trail was one of Caitlin's shoes, laces untied. Ron didn't touch anything. He went straight to the front of the store and picked up the landline to call 911, but the phone was dead. No dial tone. He reached for his cell, but it had no signal, which was impossible. He'd always had full bars inside the store. Then he heard it. A scraping sound like fingernails dragging across metal. It came from behind the meat counter. Ron followed the noise, whispering Caitlin's name. As he turned the corner, he saw the swinging double doors that led to the walk-in freezer slowly open. The scraping stopped. He hesitated, then stepped inside. The temperature hit him like a punch. His breath fogged in the air as he scanned the room. Racks of beef, plastic-wrapped chicken, and nothing. The room was empty. But just as he turned to leave, he noticed something wrong with the frost on the floor. There were footprints, bare, small, and leading into the corner where a stack of empty boxes was piled to the ceiling. He walked over, pushed a few aside, and found a small gap behind them, barely big enough for a person to squeeze through. Then his flashlight went out. Ron said he doesn't remember anything after that. He woke up in the cereal aisle at 5:34 a.m. with a splitting headache and blood under his fingernails. Caitlin was never found. No footage of her ever leaving the building. The camera in aisle 7, where she was last seen, had static from midnight to 4 a.m., something that had never happened before. The police searched for weeks. Dogs were brought in, but they refused to enter the walk-in freezer. They howled at it, tails between their legs. Eventually, the case went cold. A year later, Hilson's Market shut down. But here's the part that sticks with people. When the new owner came in to renovate the space, he knocked down the back wall of the freezer and discovered a small, bricked-off room. No door, no windows. Just a single chair bolted to the center of the floor. And on the far wall, scratched into the cement, were the words, "I never clocked out." No one knows who built that room. No records show any renovation like that. And to this day, if you ask the old employees about Caitlin, they'll change the subject or walk away. One of them, Ron, refuses to talk at all. He moved 3 states away and hasn't spoken a word since.
Story number 3.
There was an old grocery store off Route 19 in rural Pennsylvania. Miller's Market, barely lit, always a little too cold, and forever carrying that faint, musty smell of damp concrete and freezer burn. It had been there for decades, long before the town expanded. Locals swore by its low prices and wide aisles, but younger folks avoided it when they could. Something about it felt wrong. It wasn't just the flickering lights or the buzzing freezer section. It was something deeper, unspoken. Grace had just started her night shift job there. She was a senior at the local college, working late hours to pay off tuition. She didn't mind the quiet. In fact, she welcomed it. The manager, a rail-thin man named Dennis with a raspy voice and sunken eyes, gave her the usual tour on her first night. He barely spoke, only gave her a list of closing tasks and muttered, "Don't bother going past aisle 9. The freezers back there haven't worked in years." There was no aisle 9 on the store map. That first night was uneventful, mostly restocking and cleaning, until just after midnight. Grace was sweeping near the dairy section when she heard the click of a shopping cart behind her. Turning around, the aisle was empty. No carts, no customers. The store had been locked up hours ago. She shook it off. Maybe a stray cart had rolled. But then she heard it again. Click, click, click. The slow, deliberate sound of wheels turning. She walked to the end of the aisle and glanced around the corner. Nothing. When she turned back, one of the cooler doors was wide open. Inside, the cold mist was billowing out like breath on a winter morning. She hadn't opened it. She knew she hadn't. She closed it and stepped back. Then she saw the fog on the glass. It wasn't from the inside, it was on the outside, smeared across the surface in a perfect handprint. She reported it to Dennis the next morning. He didn't even flinch. "Store gets weird sometimes at night," he muttered, lighting a cigarette right there in the office. "Just do your job." By her fourth shift, the strange events had escalated. The security camera monitors would glitch every night around 12:17 a.m., right before that dragging sound started again. She once watched as a figure, tall, stiff, and completely motionless, stood at the end of aisle 9 on the grainy footage. But when she rushed there in person, there was only a spill of broken glass and milk on the floor, as though something huge had crashed into the shelves. The scariest moment came on a Thursday. It was dead silent. So quiet she could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights like a distant scream. That night, she noticed something new. A door, right next to the expired seafood freezer. A narrow metal door she swore wasn't there before. No signage, no handle, just a keypad. She couldn't resist. She tried random codes. Nothing, but then she remembered the timestamp, 12:17. She punched it in. The lock clicked. The door opened into a narrow corridor. Freezing, dark. The kind of dark that swallows sound and breath and logic. She stepped in, phone flashlight cutting through the black. The walls were lined with broken carts and old mannequin parts, arms and legs made of plastic, all scorched and twisted. On the floor, old produce tags. One of them had her name printed on it in smeared red ink. She turned to run, and the door was gone. Not closed, gone like it never existed. The hallway stretched endlessly in both directions now. That's when she heard it. The dragging. Something metal screeching against concrete. Getting closer. Her flashlight flickered, died. In total darkness, she could feel it coming. Heavy breathing. That metallic groan of a cart. A whisper just behind her ear. Cleanup on aisle 9. She doesn't remember escaping. They found her the next morning, curled up in the break room freezer, muttering numbers over and over. 12:17. Her eyes wouldn't focus, and she never spoke again. Not about what she saw. Not about how she got locked in a room that doesn't exist. Miller's Market still operates, still understocked, still quiet. Sometimes late-night shoppers swear they hear a woman whispering from aisle 9. And if they follow it, they find carts with no one pushing them, or handprints on the dairy cooler doors, or worse, tags on the shelves with their names on them. The store manager says it's just imagination, that there is no aisle 9. But then again, you can see it, just barely, if you look at the store map under blacklight, a thin line where the paper's been rubbed out, where the real horror waits.
Story number 4.
There's a small grocery store in western Pennsylvania, tucked between a forested highway and an old strip mall that hasn't seen life since the early 2000s. It's the kind of place where the floors still creak, the fluorescent lights hum louder than the radios playing static lace top 40, and the freezer aisle has one corner that always smells like rotting meat, no matter how many times it's cleaned. Everyone in town calls it McGrevies, even though the sign out front just says grocer. It's also where Ethan worked the overnight shift for 2 years, right up until the night he disappeared. Ethan was 25, soft-spoken, kept to himself. He didn't mind the graveyard shift, said it was peaceful, quiet, said he liked the way the store felt at night. That's what he used to say, until a few weeks before he vanished. He started mentioning odd things in the break room. Products would be in different places from where he'd stocked them. The register would randomly power on, even though he was nowhere near it. Once, he said he heard someone whisper his name from the walk-in freezer, even though he was the only one in the store. They brushed it off as exhaustion, maybe some stress. But Ethan wasn't the paranoid type. One night, the assistant manager checked the security tapes. Just out of curiosity, Ethan had logged a report saying the cereal aisle had been rearranged, cans in place of boxes, some even stacked in unnatural patterns. She fast-forwarded through the footage, mostly bored, until she saw something that made her choke on her coffee. At 3:42 a.m., Ethan walked into frame, rolling a cart. Then, behind him, no one entered the aisle, no movement. But slowly, one by one, items began to slide off the shelves. Not fall, slide. as if guided. You can clearly see a can of green beans move up and stack on top of another. Then another. Ethan was facing away, didn't even notice. He just kept working. That footage was shown once to the store manager. Never again. It was deleted from the system the next day. 2 nights later, Ethan radioed the front desk. His voice was shaky. "I think someone's in the back room. I heard." Then the radio cut. They called back. No answer. The morning manager arrived at 6 a.m. sharp. The store was locked from the inside. Lights on. Inventory untouched. Ethan's car was still in the lot. The only sign of him was his name tag, found in aisle 7, lying next to a half-full mop bucket and a trail of wet footprints that led straight into the walk-in freezer, but never out. Police searched the place top to bottom. No signs of struggle. No fingerprints. No blood. Nothing in the freezer except an industrial rack of meat and frozen dinners, and the scent of bleach that hadn't been used by anyone on record. A week after Ethan's disappearance, the store held a quiet reopening. Staff was rotated, new hires, but the night shift position remained vacant until May of the following year, when a drifter named Al took the job. Said he didn't believe in ghosts, didn't care about the rumors. He lasted 4 days. On the 5th night, the manager arrived early, just after 5 a.m. All the store lights were on, and the front door was wide open. Inside, it was completely silent. Nothing looked disturbed until they reached the back room. Every single item in the store had been rearranged into a spiral. Boxes, cans, eggs, shampoo bottles, dog food, every shelf completely cleared. Every item laid in concentric circles starting at the center of the produce section. In the middle, Al's shoes. Just his shoes. No sign of him. No prints. No footage. The cameras had all stopped recording at exactly 3:42 a.m., the same time Ethan had walked into aisle 4 a year earlier, never to be seen again. The store is still open, still small, still creaky and humming and a little too cold, even in the summer. But nobody takes the night shift anymore. Not since the manager stopped asking. Because the last 3 times they tried to hire, the applications all had the same name, typed neatly in block letters at the top. Ethan Rayner.